Hey, everybody, this is Nihar Chhaya. I am a Fortune 50 executive coach and president of Partner Exec. And this is the Executive Experience, my LinkedIn Live series, where I'll be hosting a dear friend of mine, leadership expert Ron Carucci. Hey, Ron.
Nihar, what's up, bud?
Good to see you, Ron. So Ron is the co-founder and managing partner of Navalent, a firm dedicated to helping companies implement meaningful organizational change. And Ron has worked alongside the CEOs and senior leaders of really top-notch companies over the past 30 years, including Microsoft, Starbucks, Hershey, AbbVie, and the CIA. And he actually has spearheaded with his team a groundbreaking 15-year study on the topics of honesty, justice, and purpose in today's organizations. And so we're going to have a good discussion about his work. I know he has a book coming out pretty soon, and I want to make sure we answer some questions from the audience as well, because this is, I think, a relevant topic in today's climate. So before I actually turn it over to Ron, I wanted to just also encourage all of you that might be joining in right now. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Feel free to type in the chat box city or state or country you're tuning in from. Make sure you get the questions going. I realized actually doing this LinkedIn Live for a few sessions recently, 30 minutes goes by pretty fast. So want to make sure that I'm getting some questions in there. And also, feel free to like and comment and share so you can get some of your friends and connections on the line as well. All right. So Ron, let's jump in. So Ron, I guess, to start off with, the reason why I did want to bring you on the show, obviously, because I'm a big fan. And Ron, is a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review. That's actually where I first saw his writing. I was a huge fan of because he actually writes about topics that I think a lot of us don't want to really bring to the surface, but we need to, like justice and trust and purpose and honesty. And in particular, I wanted to hear more about this study that you did, and maybe you can share a little bit about why it was important for you to do.
Yeah, thanks, Nihar. So it's great to be with you. I think we've all roll our eyes and are sick to our stomachs if we hear one more Volkswagen story, one more DuPont story, one more Wells Fargo story. Mm-hmm. We want to pass out. And those of us who are in the businesses of trying to make organizations better and safer and thrive and see leaders do their best work are all set back. We're all tarnished with these stories. And I thought, I'm so tired of hearing that it's a bunch of bad apples. It's a couple of bad people. 5,000 people didn't wake up at Wells Fargo all on the same day and go, hey, here's an idea. So I wanted to understand why. I wanted to understand under what conditions people would behave badly. I didn't know if we could do it. We have this phenomenal research database. We've been with all of our diagnostic interviews. And we had 3,200 interviews over 15 years we could go back and analyze. So for our last study for Rising to Power, 10 years, we analyzed individual behaviors. We wanted to look at what shapes great leaders. And that's how we found out about the ascent problem of failure. This time we isolated for systemic factors to see if we could see, and we used some great artificial intelligence like IBM Watson to do the sophisticated statistical modeling to understand under what conditions would people be honest, tell the truth, be fair and just. And it turned out that the research revealed that there are 4 predictable factors that organizations are creating daily that grow their ethical fungus in their petri dish. That unknowing to them that if these conditions are true, you are highly multiplying your odds that you're going to be on the front page story of a New York Times article that you never wanted to be in.
Wow. And, so tell me a little bit about what those 4 factors were.
Yeah. So the first one was strategic clarity, being who you say you are. Every company has a mission, vision, values. They make brand promises. They want everybody's purpose washing now, looking like we have purpose. And everybody knows that workers today, more than anything else, want a sense of meaning in their work, and they want to be able to locate their own purpose in yours. Mm-hmm. When all those things align and your actions and your words actually match, you are 3 times more likely to have people behave fairly and tell the truth. But when there's a mismatch, when your actions and words don't match and people feel lost in their own purpose, you've now institutionalized duplicity, meaning you've announced to your company, we say one thing and do another, which now gives everybody permission to do the same and follow suit. When that's the case, you're 3 times more likely to have people lie, distort the truth, and behave unfairly. The second was accountability systems. We all know that our accountability systems are messed up, unfair. Nobody ever walks out of that performance review going, wow, that was great. Right. People never say, can't wait till my quarterly one-on-one. They dread it, right? I talked to a client months ago, and he was irate. He opened up our conversation with, "She gave me a 3. I've always been a 4 my whole career, even a 5. I've never been a 3, but just because she gets a quota of 4s, I don't get a 3." Like, listen to how irate. We've all heard it, right? How irrational that is. His whole sum total of his whole sense of being was reduced to a category. So when your accountability systems are seen as unfair and unjust, people feel unseen in them, you're 4 times more likely to have people lie and behave unfairly. But when they are seen as fair and just, and measuring contribution in an honest way, you're 4 times more likely to have people tell the truth and behave fairly toward others. Governance. We all know what those meetings of orchestrated theater look like, right? We walk in and it's all planned out and it's not a real meeting. When those governance structures, the processes with which you move resources and make decisions, have no transparency, and I got to make stuff up to figure out what's going on, or I got to rely on rumors, and those meetings are just nothing but theater, you're 3.5 times more likely to have people lie, withhold the truth. But when those meetings are safe places for honest debates and open exchanges, and the decisions are transparent, people don't have to be agreed with, but I can code how the decision was made. Now you're 3.5 times more likely to have people tell the truth and do what's right and not put their own self-interest first. And the last one, which I think was the most surprising, was the border wars. We call them silos. We call them boundary wars. We call them cross-functional rivalries. We have all kinds of names for them. But we know that at the seams of the organization where real value gets created, we often have lots of disconnects and misalignments. And when those tensions are unresolved, when there's conflict there that you can't work through, marketing, sales, operations, supply chain, all the classic ones, Northeast and Asia Pacific, you're 6 times more likely to have people lie or distort the truth. Because now when you fragmented the truth, you have dueling truths, right? So now I have to win, you have to lose. But when you have cohesion at those borders, when you have people who can resolve those issues and all feel part of a bigger story than themselves, when they feel like we're joining forces together for a greater good, now you're 6 times more likely to have people put their own interests behind others and be honest and say the hard truths. And the models are cumulative. So if you add them all up and you're the proud owner of all 4 of those conditions, 16 times more likely to end up in a story you never imagined being in.
Yeah, I resonate with all 4 of those actually in my executive coaching work. And first of all, I'm curious to actually even hear from the audience too. Which of these 4 have you experienced, if not all 4 or some of them? I have to believe you have, or you've seen somebody that has. One thing that, when I think about the accountability one, succession planning and promotions, for instance, in a company, career planning, it does seem like it's in a secret room. It's kind of done in private. And then we're just all waiting. A lot of the people I coach are in that situation where they're like, I'm doing all the right things, but I'm still stuck at director. I'm still stuck at VP. Now, of course, there's a numbers game there. There's probably less roles to move into, but I think it does lead to certain tension and maybe even just wanting to quit. Do you find that there's dishonesty that actually comes out? Do people start kind of lying about what they do, or maybe even taking credit for other people's accomplishments?
Yeah, I mean, what now when accountability systems feel rigged, I now have to hide my mistakes and embellish my accomplishments. You're now, that's what you're paying me to do. When we define a sense of purpose as only upward mobility, now everybody's a rival, right? So what was interesting, some of the research I did for the book, I wanted to understand what the neuroscience behind this was, and I found a fascinating study that what categorical thinking does to our brains. So when we get put in a box, high potential, you're a 5, whatever it actually triggers our amygdala. We actually feel threatened. Our sense of identity feels out of control, and we feel like we're in danger because we feel unseen, unheard, and out of control of our own destiny. So we've known for a long time that categorical behavior, putting people in boxes, is shaming, it's dismissive, and we've taken accountability. And the process that should be the most dignifying in our organization is the most dehumanizing. So we have to restore dignity and justice to accountability by putting a humane sense of honor back in it. The conversations, and they shouldn't, you and I both know they should be happening more than once a year, but the regular conversations about my contribution should be the most sacred conversations I have. Even the ones that are hard about where I'm falling short should be sacred. And yet people dread them. They resent them. They feel horrible about them. They feel disrespected in them. I mean, every day, this is what's happening in organizations because we've defined accountability as accounting, right? I'm here to count your performance and tally it rather than honor it. So I want to redefine accountability to mean my job as a leader is to create the dignity for you to do your best work. Even if that means kicking your butt to be better. My job is to bring out your best performance and make you proud.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One of the things that also really stood out to me was your work on justice, because so I think you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you talked about how honesty, justice, and purpose actually intersect together in almost like a Venn diagram for meaning at work. And I could be wrong, but it seems like justice is one of those things that people don't necessarily associate with, you know, their everyday finding purpose in their career. Maybe because nowadays we're actually being more, you know, confronted with the idea that there are some real inequities going on. But how much of it should I actually, you know, point out as opposed to being a bystander? Can you speak a little bit more about, are you optimistic at all about how people are willing to stop just kind of sitting idly by and seeing these things happen, or they're going to step in and say something?
Well, I think our national discussion and all of the heartache over some of the racial inequities is bringing injustice to the forefront in general. All you have to do is ask yourself how many times you have said or thought the words, "That's not fair." How the budget was set, who got the promotion, whose idea was adopted, who saw favoritism, how often you've not been heard. Just the times you have felt unseen and unfairly treated or unfairly regarded for your ideas or your contributions. That's it. A leader's positional power, that's the one separator of leaders from, and the higher up you go, the more positional power you have more ability to influence organizational injustices than anybody. That's your job. It's not that you have to be a crusader. It shouldn't require courage. It should require understanding that this is your role. When there are inequities in your organization, when there are processes that distribute resources unfairly, you're putting your strategy at risk. Forget about it. When there are biases in selection, you're putting your sense of your whole workforce at risk, not just those who are marginalized. And you should be on the hunt for inequities. Now, the difference between, there are natural tensions. There are always trade-offs and tensions you have to make. But if you're not honest about how you arbitrate those tensions, you risk injustice. But you should be injustice hunting every day. Consider that your a major part of your day job, and find the places where your processes, your systems, your the way you treat your employees. Ask yourself this question as a leader. Do people see you as a dignified place of their own contribution? Are you a place where they feel most proud of their work, even when they fail? 2, how often are people bringing you information that is uncomfortable to hear on a regular basis? If both of those things are not true, you can be very confident your leadership sucks.
Well, you know, you and I have also written about the topic of envy. You know, you've written quite a few HBR articles about that. I wrote one recently, and
it was a great piece. That was a great piece. I was
well, it brings up the question for me, which is, if you're a leader, and to what you said, you know, you have to think about your job as a leader is to be on the hunt for injustices. What about the leader that is constantly absorbed by the injustices they feel, or that they're constantly thinking, well, you know, I have to look out for my career. I still haven't, you know, I don't have all the power that I want yet.
Isn't it funny how many leaders we meet, VPs, SVPs, you know, people with significant influence, and they've disempowered themselves. I don't have any power. I can't get anything done.
They play the victim.
Shocking. And once you're in victim mode, you're taking yourself out of the game, right? When you've made the story with you as the central character in it, and there's no other characters in the story, it's already a tragedy, not a comedy, a black comedy. It's not a joyful story. And so you have to flip the script, right? You have to put yourself into a much bigger story and recognize that you're there for others. You're not there for you. That's what leadership is. And if you think that, you know, you're there to serve your own interests and your own career path, rest assured that if you're obsessed with your own success and obsessed with your own sense of marginalization, everybody above you knows it. And they're probably tired of it. So, you know, flip the script and get off that narrative and get into a narrative. Who can I make successful here? Who can I help advance? roles, contributions, career paths can I amplify? Forget about who's doing it for you. You gave that up when you became a leader. Not entirely, and it's not that you shouldn't be worried or thinking about your own career. That's fine. But if it's consuming all of your attention and resentment over what you're not getting, what opportunities someone else got instead of you, who's not listening to you, be very confident that probably others hear that narrative and are probably a little bit tired of it.
Yeah, great point. So, Ron, I just want to give a shout out to some of the folks that are joining us. So we have Christy from Nashville, our fellow Rexer friend, Your Day from Bangkok. Thanks for joining. Chris Littlefield, our friend, is on the line as well.
Yeah.
And there's a question from Chris that actually that came up. How do you manage the perception of unfairness?
That's a great question. I'm gonna knowing Chris and his insight, I'm going to assume that he's keying in on the word perception, because inequity and inequality are sometimes the same, sometimes they're not. I think sometimes when things are perceived to be unfair, it's because the transparency behind a decision was not there, right? So I'm now probably interpreting a decision as unfair because it didn't go my way. I may not have deserved the promotion, right? But if I don't have the data, if I don't have the understanding, if I wasn't invited into an honest conversation about how a decision went, or the way a process is supposed to work, or how I'm meant to participate in it, I will assume unfairness. The dangerous game there is if somebody's been marginalized in their life, they were bullied, they're a person of color or minority, and they have a sense of marginalized, and you have to already recognize that when they come to the table, you have to help them graciously understand how things work so that they're not looking to be treated unfairly, because you may be having your behaviors interpreted in ways that you don't intend and may not be unfair. Or you may actually be being unfair and not even know it, right? So if you're not having the conversation about how people are feeling about certain decisions or processes or certain opportunities they're getting or want, but you don't know they want. I've seen classic cases where people who didn't assert themselves, wanted major opportunities, cared about them deeply, were talented for them, but never put forth their desire. And the manager assumed they didn't want it because they were quiet, right? And so finally, when the manager gave opportunities to somebody else and the person spoke up, the manager was like, I had no idea this was important to you. Now, duh, for the manager, why didn't you ask? That's your job to know, but it's also our job to self-advocate in a way that's helpful. So a lot of times unfairness, when it's not really unfairness, it is just a perception. It's because there are just so many conversations that aren't happening except in our heads.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point also. I think back to our discussions about your work, and you mentioned that a lot of this is around finding out why even otherwise honest people lie at work. And that sometimes it's actually not coming from necessarily a bad place. It's like maybe they want to be polite, or maybe they struggle with asserting themselves, to your point, and really speaking their truth. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit more about what you found in that area?
I think we're in a day and age today where we have dangerously conflated speaking your truth with speaking the truth, and we've assumed that adopting the posture of a big middle finger and outrage equates to the truth, and that's a dangerous place. I think unproductive behavior is not random. When you are lying, I wrote a piece on this for HBR called "What to Do when you've been caught in a lie." We lied. There's a reason we lied. It was to meet some need. It was either self-protection or self-interest. But if you embellished a contribution, if you withheld information, if you threw somebody into the bus, if you deflected blame, if you did something you knew was deceitful, even if it was out of deep terror or fear of what would happen if you told the truth, you still did it for a reason. And that reason served some need. It's not random. And so you have to be honest with yourself about, and most of us think we got away with it. Right? Most of us think it worked. We didn't get caught. But if you ask people, how many of you feel like you have a really, really astute BS barometer? Everybody's hands goes up. They ask, well, then why do you feel like other people's budget aren't as good as yours when you do it? They can't answer you. So you know that you're taking a risk, because people will start to see through a pattern of, embellished data, slightly twisted perspectives, missing information. just be clear that when you're doing that you believe you're meeting some need to protect, to self-promote, to avoid conflict, and it's going to bite you in the end. You're never going to win through deceit. Yes, there are pathological liars out there who just can't not help but lie, and that's who they are, and that's probably some deeper psychopathy at operative. Most of us, research would say that most of us lie between 1 and 2 times a day. So the question is not, are you a dishonest person? I don't think they necessarily, telling a lie makes you dishonest. It makes you probably self-deceived in some way, because you believe that choice is meeting a need that it probably isn't.
Yeah, and so I want to get your thoughts on this idea of why we don't necessarily call people liars, because it feels loaded. For instance, like, I don't know if you've noticed this, and I don't want to get too political, but if you look at the media, if you notice fact checking, for instance, I think New York Times actually got caught up in this about like, well, this wasn't a lie. This was actually like an untruth versus some, like an inaccurate statement. How do you get people to, I guess, accept, you mentioned they have an astute BS barometer, yet people are still kind of unwilling to say, hey, listen, you're lying to me, as opposed to, oh, maybe you got this wrong, or maybe we misunderstood each other. What are your thoughts on that whole mix?
So, it's you have these dueling narratives, right? Most people who are being manipulative, right? I had a coaching executive recently who referred to an employee as a liar, and I said I actually see them as more manipulative. They have an agenda. In fact, I have my next piece in HBR coming out on how to coach a manipulative person. Who in fact is trying. They have an agenda. The media, we know, has an agenda, right? They have political agendas. They depend on clicks, likes, and ad revenue. So they have to rile contempt. They have to incite outrage by amplifying the echo chamber they know you're in. They're not going to give you a balanced point of view. That's not their job. So you have to often remember to consider the source. Now, if it's a direct colleague, obviously a full frontal assault going, you're a liar, is going to end the relationship, right? So you have to be clear on what is it I want from this. Sure. So you have to be able to say Nihar, I have to sort of pause here, and I have to tell you that I'm a little bit concerned about a pattern I'm seeing. Now, this is the 3rd time you've said these things to me when I believe these things to be true. So I'm having a hard time reconciling the gap between them. Can you help me? So you have to put it on the table in a way that makes the person not shut down and defend and whatever. And you're going to get all the, oh, well, no, I didn't. You're going to get all that stuff. But at least you put them on notice, right? You've said, whatever this is you're doing, it's not working. So at least it's called them to account for, could it be unconscious? Maybe. Sometimes they're just trying to, protect themselves from being exposed or vulnerable, or just they're trying to present a certain image to you, or look a certain way, or look confident or smart. But whatever it is, we owe our colleagues the kindness and the compassion to say, hey, there's a consistent pattern here of a gap between what you're telling me and what I believe to be so, or what other facts are telling me. Now, used to be information was power, but now there's so much information that it's no longer the information is power. It's whose interpretation prevails, right? We can make facts say anything we want them to. So we're always going to have dueling fact bases. But if there's certain pieces of your fact base missing that are in mine, I need to understand. Tell me why these facts didn't appear in your ideas. So I think you have to call the question specifically without making an attribution of this is a deep character flaw and you're a liar.
Right. Well, what about when you're dealing with the power differential? For instance, I worked for a boss that was an outright liar and lied to me about many situations. And, it was one of those things where if I actually brought it up in a very systematic kind of way to keep the relationship going, it didn't really work as well, because he automatically saw me as someone who was too sensitive or too, get on with it. Any thoughts on that?
Here's the painful choice you have to ask in your own soul. When you have a lying boss, I have a piece on this called, what happens when your boss betrays you. If you collude with them and train them that it's okay, you're damaging your own soul. Now, forget about how you're reinforcing the behavior with them. You have to ask yourself, is this the place that's healthy for me to be? I think when you want to confront a boss, that might be threatened or feel exposed, data is critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to say, gee, Bill, you told me the meeting for that product was Wednesday, but I found out that it was actually Tuesday. It already happened.
Mm-hmm.
How do I understand what happened there? Now, you're going to get the whole, my secretary must have sent the wrong invite. Blah, 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 blah. But again, you'll have to put them on notice. I saw what you did.
Yeah. Because I think you made a great point about the interpretation. I feel like now we're moving into territory where people can easily gaslight people.
Oh, sure.
And it's like, and the problem is that even if you don't want to put them in a difficult spot and, make them feel as if you're accusing them, just the idea of bringing up the discussion about it. Like I've been in a situation where people are, it's like the fragility around, I can't believe you even thought that I would potentially lie to you, and then all of a sudden I'm the person that feels guilty for even calling it out. But just curious about whether that is something that is significant enough to me.
It's a card I've played, and it's a dangerous one as a consultant, but I played this card before. I have played that, maybe it is just me. But the one thing I'd ask you to consider, if it's not just me, have you damaged your credibility in places you don't even know it's damaged?
Mm-hmm.
I'd ask you to walk away thinking, gosh, if this is how you're dealing with me, could have been an honest mistake, but we've had 6 honest mistakes in the last 2 months, so I'm not sure how. But if this is how you operate with other people, my concern for you is your own credibility. So I would want you to think about that.
Yeah. I think it's a great point around still recognizing that you can have that communication without and still have positive intent on both sides, and then you also have the freedom to make decisions for yourself if you feel like that's not a safe place to be.
If you collude with a liar, my mom always told me never mud wrestle with a pig because they can't lie.
Likes it.
If you're in bed with a liar, people are going to assume, and then you look like a yes man or a yes woman. You look like you're part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Nobody who's a pathological manipulator or deceiver gets away with it for long. You might charm some people and inspire some people with your energy or however you do it, or wow them with your dazzling facts for a certain season. But at some point, inevitably, someone's going to go, "There's a little chick in this armor here," and it's going to come out. And then the question is it recoverable?
Right. I know we just have a few more minutes here. And if there's any more questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. One question I did have for you, Ron, was, so you talked about the first factor from your research was the strategic intent, right? That companies that don't, I guess, have the do what they say is likely to have people that are going to fall into those dishonest behaviors. So do you find that that is a very common thing? I've found that even, let's say Volkswagen and those kind of companies are much more scandalous, but I've found even in situations where, like, I coach leaders that might work for a company that says, all their posters are about, we innovate and we are all about freedom of expression and, like, hey, we want to sponsor new projects, but really that will never happen. If you ever step outside of your silo outside of your domain, your wrist is slapped.
Yep.
Is that also kind of fall into that category?
Those are the worst offenders. We can explain away the scandals, right? As nauseating as they are. It's the everyday duplicity that is most destructive. Most of those campaigns are for external. We think we can campaign our way to a good-looking company, but it's all for external consumption, right? It's for the wall, the screensaver, the mugs, the website. But ask the question. Ask your executives: how often do you take out the mission and values and talk about them as a team? And ask yourself, how are we doing with these? Where does this show up in our behavior every day? Where are we not living them? Right? Some companies go as far as to put the values behaviors in a 360 feedback. And it says, we value teamwork and collaboration. And you go, that's interesting because your reward system only rewards individual behavior.
Right.
And your governance processes all flow to the top. So tell me how you're not discouraging collaborative behavior here. And they don't do the deeper work to examine their system against the screen they've set of the right behaviors. And the problem is most people get to the place where the values become important when there's been a scandal. So integrity becomes a value when there's been this deceit. Diversity and inclusion becomes a value when there's been a lot of lawsuits. Innovation becomes a value when we've missed 4 market product launches, right? So anytime you try and use values to correct somebody, you can rest assured the last thing that's going to happen is anybody wants to be corrected.
Right.
But we put those things up on the wall and we think we're done, rather than now we have to start doing the hard work of actually embodying them.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. Well, do you have time for one more question, Ron? Or
I'm good if you're good.
Okay. Yep. This question is from Chris. How do companies with a messy past start to make the shift to a more just company?
Well, confession is good for the soul, Chris. You have to own the messy past, right? So I studied 2 companies side by side. Both companies during the 80s learned that their products kill people, poisoned them. One was DuPont, one was Patagonia,
wow.
Right? And they had dramatically different responses to that poisoning thing. I don't know. DuPont's try to recover. They just spun off the chemical company that made the poisonous chemicals. But I don't know that how trusted they'll ever be as a company. You have to want to repent. You have to really want to make things right. Wells Fargo, it just keeps getting worse. We keep finding out more stuff. They still can't find a CEO. So once that stuff is deeply rooted in your organization and in your culture, if you really want it to go, companies can recover, but it takes a lot of work. You can't campaign your way out of a past like that. You have to really want to change it. I look at what Satya Nadella is doing at Microsoft. I look at what some of these leaders Hubert Joly did at Best Buy. Phenomenal transformations, but to the DNA, and relentless till it was done. It takes a remarkable set of committed leaders to want to do that kind of redemption, and most don't have that kind of fortitude.
Yeah, but I think that the underlying message is that it can be done, and it's slowly catching wind by work like yours. Ron, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we're going to have you back because there's so much more to dive into here. Can you share with us a little bit of how people can find you, and if they want to, get to know you better, anything like that, anything you can share?
Yep. My website is iwishIwasNiharChhaya.com.
Likewise.
Come visit us. We're at Navalent, NAVALENT.com. We got all kinds of cool free ebooks and white papers and videos and blogs and resources you can come download there. We have a free ebook on leading transformation at navalent.com/transformation. So come get that if you want to see our playbook for how we do transformational work. Twitter at Ron Carucci, LinkedIn, come follow me there and hang out. Let's keep talking.
Excellent. Well, yeah, make sure you to follow Ron. If you haven't followed me, make sure you click on the follow. Would love to stay in touch. No, that's fine. And just to know that we have some more LinkedIn Lives coming up. And Ron, as always, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for being a great friend and a great source of wisdom in this field.
High five, buddy. Good to see you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.